mid-afternoon, last day of the conference. So wake up, everybody. This is important. So a coordinated international lunar resource prospecting campaign seems like a no-brainer in terms of what needs to be done at the moon. We talk about resources. The resources are going to enhance sustainability of human space exploration. Resources are going to underpin a vibrant cislunar economy. But resources do not do that. We need to understand the reserve potential of resources. So we need to know how much of these resources are present. Can we get to them? Can we mine them? Can we actually extract them? Can we refine them? Can we store them? Can we use them? So actually going to go back because you can see here this list of names. These are the core group, and I gave a similar talk at Luxembourg Space Resources Week in April, and we had an in-person get-together, and we're now over 20 people with an international flavor to it. And so this is gaining some traction in terms of how we can do this. And I want to go through a little bit of history and then end up with what seemed to be a no-brainer conclusion, but it took me a while to figure it out, but we'll get to that in a bit. So there are roadblocks in situ resource utilization. There are two of them. All right, there's the push from understanding the reserve potential, but there's also the lack of a pull of demand and markets. So now we have a chicken and egg thing, because until we understand the reserve potential, we're not going to have much of a demand. And we're not going to get reserve potential if there's no demand for the product. So what do we do about that? So you can see there down at the bottom of the slide, there are a number of different references you can go look at. And I want to point out Carlos Espejel, who works for iSpace in Europe. And he's put together this lunar ore reserve standards, because we need standards to abide by and to guide us in this whole endeavor. And I'm going to come back to him in a little bit. But if we look at ground truth data and the demand markets, these need to be established. And so we figured that the best way to do that is to have an international coordinated lunar resource prospecting campaign to get those data. Sounds simple, doesn't it? Well, it sort of is. And we'll get onto that as well. So what have we done? We had two of the lunar surface science workshops, one about defining what an international lunar resource prospecting campaign would look like, and then the more thornier issue of how do you implement that sort of thing. And if we look at the last one about the implementation, a number of things came out from that, a number of important findings. If we do it this way, it is compliant with the Outer Space Treaty. It enables cooperation at various levels of involvement. This is a diplomatic tool because it brings nations together with a common goal. And we live in an era that so desperately needs diplomacy. And it is important to remember that the moon can be that diplomatic tool. If we do it as an international collaboration, it sort of relieves the pressure on any one country to do it on their own, because it's not cheap. And then the last one that may be sort of faded out at the bottom there in red, maybe the most important one of the finding was this coordination should be coordinated by a neutral broker, a non-governmental organization, the mythical NGO. And that sort of stumped me for quite a while. So what do we have going on? This is the beginning of the coordination on the left here, because we have current and we have scheduled missions going to the moon that can be coordinated. And this is something that we need to think about. We've got very capable spacecraft either going to the surface or orbiting the moon. They are packed with different instruments, so potentially we can get multiple data sets on the same target once we figure out what those targets are. So we've also got other planned missions with China and Russia. Lunar 25 is supposed to go soon, I believe. This month, I've heard, but we will see whether or not that happens. But it comes back to who does the coordination. And then how can we expand the coordination? So we can refine through peer review this lunar ore reserve standards. And Carlos and I had a meeting, a 2D meeting, to discuss how this is going to happen. And that publication should be submitted by the end of October this year. We can have inclusion of partners. Is it open to everybody? Should it just be open to people in the Artemis Accords? I prefer the former. Everybody's welcome. And let's go together. Leveraging from commercial industry. There's got to be a hook for commercial participation. So we have to show a reserve potential, which in turn requires a value put on these resources, which requires a demand and a market. And a potential reserve report for the moon can be done now. And what it will do, it won't be definitive, but what it will highlight are the much needed data. It will specify those missing data sets at the fidelity we need to be able to actually quantify the reserve potential that we have on the moon. And interestingly, at NASA Ames in April of this year, there was a space economy workshop. And it's online, and you can go to that link there, and full of very interesting talks. Some were a little boring, but we won't go there. But it was well worth listening to, and if you get a chance, listen to it. But that's a workshop. We have a workshop. What's happening next? How are we going to move this forward? And that's what we want to do. Because the way forward, and thinking about this, who does the coordination? We do. What does that mean? The community. The community can do that coordination. And it's a simple answer. How do we do that? Well, we talk to these various people involved in these missions. We get their buy-in. I spoke to Dr. Kim here from Kigam in Korea about KPLO, getting that mission involved. They've got a rich data set being built over the targets that we need. Well, what are those targets? Well, let's find out a little bit. We need to have community workshops. We can have community comments. We can have community suggestions. We could set this up so that we can get those targets that we can then ask these spacecraft that are currently at the moon and those that are going to get those data sets that we need to actually move forward to say, you know what, Lupex, you're going in a couple of years. Do you think you could adjust to go to this one because this looks really interesting? That's the coordination that we're talking about here, the community effort to do that on the basis of, and here's a concept, data. This is going to be really good. And we can work with mission PIs to get multiple data sets of the same targets. We can integrate with current data sets, look at the petabytes of data that have come back from LRO, and then define these targets for surface asset investigation so we can actually move forward in that way. So what targets are we talking about? Well, let's start with the PSRs. We're going to the South Pole because of the billions of tons of water ice. Can we actually access it? Shackleton Crater, 4.5 kilometers deep down a very steep slope at about 40 Kelvin. It's going to be difficult to access, but look around at the smaller ones there. This comes from Julie Kleinhand's work, taking this image from the NASA's plan for sustained lunar exploration and development. And you can see some of those smaller ones there that's actually emphasized by Erwin's work in this image here, where you have small and large PSRs. We need to be looking at these smaller PSRs for accessibility, to be able to get into them, rather than going for these large ones that may be unobtainium, and we may not be able to get to them. So you can see here a start for looking at polar resources, but there are other resources out there that we've heard about throughout this week and people are familiar with, but this is just the tip of the iceberg. Coordinating these efforts and these sites and these targets is the beginning. But then it allows us to make informed decisions of how to spend taxpayer dollars, if you like, to put surface assets down and get that much needed ground truth data to actually put lunar resources in the critical path for sustained human space exploration and maybe even human permanence on the moon. So the way forward, I think this is my last slide. If you look at those missions again, the red ones represent landed missions and the white ones represent orbital missions. And you can see Chandrayaan-3 as a lander and an orbiter. And we're hopeful that Chandrayaan-3 will be successful. So this is the way to do it. There's more to come. There's a lot of work to do, but this is the way forward where we can actually put to use all this wonderful technology that's being developed to produce products from lunar resources by actually saying, you know what, it is viable to send that to the moon, and we know where to go, and we need to do that now. Otherwise, this is all vaporware. So thank you very much.